properties available across the globe? Check our website spotblue.com or phone 0208 339 6036. That number again, 0208 339 6036. And across all social media platforms, Spot Blue.
हमारा मिशन अल्लाह की रजा मोहम्मद से वफा पाकिस्तान का दिफा हम हैं सलाम BCR.
Assalamu alaikum, I'm Mufti Taiba and you're listening to Salam BCR on medium wave 1566 and on salambcr.com. Please join me every Saturday 3 to 5 p.m. for a variety of Islamic related topics and Q&As.
मैं लोगों से मोहब्बत में अनाएं छोड़ देता हूँ, वफाएं याद रखता हूँ, जफाएं छोड़ देता हूँ. अस्सलाम वालेकुम दोस्तों, मैं हूँ इफ्तिखार रफी, एक्टर, राइटर, शायर और कॉलम नवीस, वीलॉगर फ्रॉम पाकिस्तान. और सलाम BCR, जी हाँ, ये है नया रेडियो चैनल जिस पे आप मेरी आवाज़ सुन रहे हैं.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मैं शहजाद पप्पू, आप सुन रहे हैं सलाम BCR.
Salam BCR, medium wave 1566 and online. Your home of entertainment. Broadcasting across Greater Manchester and beyond. Check our website, project29.org.uk.
क्या आप अपने कारोबार को फलता फूलता देखना चाहते हैं? अगर आपका जवाब हाँ में है तो आज ही इस्लाम BCR से राब्ता करें. फोन 0791262291.
Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम सामईन, आप सुन रहे हैं सलाम BCR और मैं आपका मेज़बान हक अनवर अल हक. आज हफ्ता इतवार सोमवार की दोपहर के बाद हमारे साथ आज एक ख़ास प्रोग्राम जो कि मेरे साथ मेरे एक मेहमान होंगे. और क्योंकि वो मेहमान अंग्रेज़ी बोलते हैं इसलिए हमें ये प्रोग्राम यहाँ से अंग्रेज़ी में होगा, हैं जी. तो मैं आपको दावत देता हूँ. अस्सलाम वालेकुम, खुशामदीद, जी आयनो, आप सुन रहे हैं सलाम BCR. मैं आपका मेज़बान हक अनवर अल हक.
Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah.
और मैं अपने सुनने वालों को सबको कहता हूँ कि जी आयनो बिस्मिल्लाह. आप कहीं भी सुन रहे हैं मेरा प्रोग्राम, आप अपना ज़रा एहतियात यानी कि अपनी हिफाजत, क्योंकि आपको पता है आपकी हिफाजत हमारे लिए बड़ी ज़रूरी है. अगर आप ड्राइव कर रहे हैं तो एहतियात से, लेकिन आपसे गुजारिश बात इतनी सी है कि अपना कान जो हमारी तरफ रखिए. और अगर आप काम पे, कहीं दुकान पे, स्टोर में, कहीं भी दफ्तर में भी हमारी आवाज़ सुन रहे हैं तो तब भी अपना जो ख्याल अपने काम में, लेकिन कान हमारी तरफ. आप हमें सुनते हैं सलाम BCR mediumwave.com और salambcr.com. और उसके अलावा जो हमारी नशियात रेडियो पे मिलती हैं वो हैं AM मीडियम वेव 1566. इसके अलावा आप हमें सुन सकते हैं यकीनन रेडियो गार्डन की एप्लीकेशन पे और सिंपल रेडियो पे. दुनिया के किसी भी खित्ते में आप हैं तो हमारी आवाज़ आप तक आसानी से पहुंच जाती है. चलिए बिना ताख़ीर किए मैं आपको अब तारफ़ कराऊं हमारे जो मेहमान हैं. उनका नाम है, क्या है? अस्सलाम वालेकुम. Ian.
Walaikum salam.
Ian, you so yes, that's fantastic. How are we doing? We're good here. Okay, Ian.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to Salam BCR's studios here in Bury. First of all, what do you think of our studio?
It's very good. It's compact, so everything you need is here. I've been in many studios, and particularly for a community one, this is right up there. Looking, the equipment looks top, all up to date. So that's all the flattery you're going to get.
Wonderful.
All right.
No, I always ask every one of our guests, and because of this new series that we're starting, hopefully, and you are the first guest, so that's really nice to hear as well. And I think any praise that we can get, it's never too much. So thank you very much for coming in. I was looking at your kind of like CV. young man studying Latin and French.
Well, I mean, my mum was French, so I never really studied it.
right,
It was in my blood, you know. So it's a language which I heard in the womb, and so when it came to actually learning it, it was no problem at all.
Okay.
And they used to send me off to France when I was a child on my own, because everyone knows French don't like speaking any other language than French.
Right.
And so they certainly wouldn't do anything other than speak French to me. So I would come back after 2-3 weeks, a month, 2 months, speaking with the accent of the area where they sent me.
Right.
So you just imagine sending your child to Birmingham and they come back with a Birmingham accent, and then Liverpool with a Liverpudlian accent, and then Glasgow with a Glaswegian. My gran was horrified because my French was so disjointed. But no, my formal education really was in classics, so Latin, Greek, and ancient history, and that was I was trained in.
Okay.
The only reason I ended up teaching French was because my mum was French, and they needed somebody who could teach French. But no, my upbringing was in what now we would call the classics, but which is a dying thing. It's rare. I mean, unfortunately, I share a similar sort of education to many members of Parliament, and our Prime Minister being one of them. His classics is much better than mine. But you know,
French and Latin.
Yeah, Latin, Greek, ancient history. Yeah, it's.
So growing up speaking those languages, opportunities that must have been fantastic in what field you wanted to go to as growing up as a young man, and the kind of life that you would have liked to have had.
Well, when I was a young man, so coming out of school or university would be 1976. The world was your oyster, particularly with my sort of class background and the education. I'd had a private education, which my father had paid for by cashing in his life insurance. I had no idea. I thought we were rich, but we weren't. It's just that, you know, I ended up being very well educated, in a manner of speaking. But the opportunities for absolutely everyone back in the 70s were there. I mean, even if it was for somebody coming out of the school with 0 qualifications, they would go straight into a factory, straight into something. I'm not saying that's the best thing, but it's better than now coming out of an education and going into nothing, which is the fate for many people, that they don't have the aspirations that can be realised very easily, and particularly in the inner cities. So many of our youngsters are drawn into a lifestyle and into employment patterns which are not at all legal much of the time, and they don't really have a career path, not even career crazy paving. I mean, it's I think it's so. I feel for young people. You know, when I walked out of my school, age 18, I walked onto a building site and said, "You got a job?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, righto." And says, "You can be a chainer." I said, "What does that mean?" Well, you go and stand over there with a pole. So that's what I did. That 3 weeks, didn't like it. Went off to France, which is what I used to do. Came back, and my friend said, "Oh, there's a job going in the hospital as a porter." So I went into there 6 months as a porter.
Okay.
And you know, this was not because of my education. These were not jobs that required any kind of qualifications. You know, standing with a pole did not require a qualification, but there was employment if you wanted it in London. And as a young person, the world was your oyster.
Right.
Very early on, I wanted to go into teaching just because I liked my subjects and I liked the holidays, and those were the two main draws.
Okay. Why teaching? I mean, I profession I went into, you know, a bit of a show off. So there must have been a reason, because as I said, looking at you know, languages, you could have gone into many different. You could have gone working for the government. You could have gone into, you know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but with yourself going in straight into education, trying these little, you know, things that happen, your experiences with the world, these jobs, but going into as a teacher.
Yeah.
Why? Make a difference?
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is that we have what people like to call the service sector. And that always appealed to me. I really didn't like the idea of making money for money's sake. In fact, I had a job offered to me at the head office of Lloyd's Bank, and that was offered to me on the fact that my father had worked for Lloyd's Bank for 40 years and been a very dutiful employee. And I had gone to a public school, so they offered me a job on the strength of that. And they said, we'll have you, you'll be a manager by 29, you'll be this, that, and the other. And
life mapped out basically for you by them.
Yeah. And I wasn't in the slightest bit interested. I only went there because I was quite miserable at university at the time. So I went for, not I'm supposed to call it an interview, a chat. But then, it's the service, serving the communities that we come from and that are around us always appealed to me more than making money.
So you then went off and you took a break from teaching?
Well, yeah, after 6 years of teaching, I realised that I was in a very nice area and a nice school, and I felt frustrated that I wasn't making an impact. And I kind of lost love of trying to teach people Latin, because I sort of think, is this really the summit of what? Because I was already ahead of faculty after about 3 years, and but I was much more interested in working with young people. So my father became very ill, and I thought, well, I need to go and look after him, and he was living 250 miles away. So I resigned my job. I left, and. Unfortunately, my father passed away within a couple of weeks of that, and I went into youth work very briefly. I was no good at it.
What kind of youth work?
Detached youth work, which meant that you would be not really in a youth club as such, but working on streets, making contact with disengaged young people and trying to get them to re-engage with society. Unfortunately, the area where I was supposed to work didn't have any young people, so it was a bit of a waste of everyone's time, and I just wasn't suited to it because it wasn't enough structure, and I'm somebody who needs structure to push against.
Right.
And if you haven't got anything to push against, then you kind of feel a bit lost. So I was very fortunate, and I mean that, to pick up a job teaching English as an additional language in Stoke-on-Trent in a couple of primary schools.
Is this where you were living at the time?
Yeah, I was living outside Stoke-on-Trent in the countryside. But I like to go into the city to work, even though I preferred living outside of the city. And the reason I got the job because I was a man, and there are no men in primary schools in those days, and there wasn't in the language support service. There were no men.
Really?
So when they noticed that I was a man, it sort of it meant that I got the job. So they would have a man on their team. And that's when I first came into contact with the Asian communities.
Right.
And because before that, I'd never, I'd always been, I'm from, depending who I'm talking to, I'm from Brixton or Dulwich, depending on, the audience.
Yeah.
But my contact was also always with Afro-Caribbean.
Right.
Never with Asians, because there weren't any in that part of London at that time. But when I was in Stoke-on-Trent, then the communities there it was basically Mirpuri, Pakistani, Kashmiri. It was, and those are the children that I was working with. And I wanted, I felt that what I knew about education was that you need to get into the home. You need to make the link between the home and the school, because kids are very adept at making sure that never the twain shall meet. And if you can persuade your parents, who particularly ones who've never been to school, that G means good, then you're not going to have your parents necessarily being able to challenge you in the ways that other parents do.
Right.
So it was, I was very keen to make the mosque aware of the school aware of the mosques.
Why?
Because it's kind of closing a circle, isn't it? If you have a home society and a home life, and cultures which are not really integrating, not really interacting, then you end up with people with a lack of opportunity. lack of inclusion.
Right.
You know, and so, you know, there are barriers, and the fewer now, but in those days it was a real barrier. I mean, when I became a Muslim, I tried to apply for jobs, because at that time I was what they now would call an assistant head teacher.
Right.
And I'd been working for 6 years. Prior to that, I'd been an advisory teacher. I'd worked in over 100 schools all over Staffordshire.
Right.
So I was very experienced. You know, I'm not an expert, I'm experienced. All right. So and that counts for a lot. If you've made the mistake several times already, you're less likely to make it again. You know, and so I was applying for jobs which I was eminently suitable, using my Muslim name, and I applied for 30 jobs, never got a look in. I was even going as far away as Luton to try and get, you know, to schools that were 100% Asian, state schools. And my boss at the time said, look, why don't you just apply using your English name? So, well, yeah, why not? You know, there's no law against it. You know, you don't have to. I mean, people seem to think that if you become a Muslim, you have to have a Muslim name. No, you don't. But, you know, it's customary that you take one. So I said, right, I'll start using Ian Fenn. I sent out 3 applications. I got 3 interviews.
So racism very rife.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
All
just
along
just
that
on
you
the
can
name,
remember.
just on the name, because I was white, as you can probably notice. Not just my hair, but you know, I'm as white can be, and as middle class as can be. But the name of Mohammed Yusuf Fenn meant that I wasn't getting interviews. So I got 3 interviews. I got the first job.
Right.
Out of the 3.
So how, Ian? Now you know we've broken that. We were going to keep it till later on, becoming a Muslim. So Ian Fenn, Muhammad Yusuf Fenn. How do you feel then that society is supposed to progress when we have this covert racism, where the people that make the decisions inevitably judge you before they even meet you or your capacity or your capabilities?
Yeah, I mean it's very complex. The whole area of racism and the way that people are perceived. And I think one makes a mistake if you think that things haven't changed, because they've changed hugely, but not necessarily always in ways that one would want. And change is never permanent. Nothing's fixed. So the kind of practices which would take place in a primary school in Stoke-on-Trent in 1986, 87. I remember there was a teacher there who would get her class that was about 70% Pakistani to stand up and sing the national anthem every morning.
Okay.
Without fail.
Yeah.
And she bedecked her classroom with Union Jacks. And I was trying to work with her, which was impossible, because there was no way that she was going to, you know, she just wanted me to take the kids away, the Asian ones away who couldn't read. And she'd be very patronising and says, "Oh, he's not one of ours, but I've put him on Fuzzbuzz and he loves it." And I'm sort of saying, "Fine, thank you, that's great, yeah," because there's, in my position, you know, there's no way I could challenge that other than to point it out to the head teacher, which was a waste of time, to my line manager, a waste of time. But those sorts of things were rife in Stoke-on-Trent, rife. And when I became a high school teacher in Stoke-on-Trent, I came across the really nasty racism that the school was on the other side of the equivalent of the Mancunian Way.
Right.
So when they put the road through Stoke-on-Trent to take the traffic, they'd separated communities from each other.
Right.
So Stoke was separated from Shelton.
Right.
It was separated from, and it's like a river. You couldn't cross it. So the kids would go to the school in the white area from the Asian area. And I'm talking in broad terms, obviously. And to get them home at night, we used to take them, get on the bus home, because they would be attacked, or they would attack others.
Right.
Because they loved it. You know, they loved, you know, the fights. They loved the confronting the racism, because it was that you become the knight in shining armor, because everyone at that age in the inner city wants to fight.
Right. Okay.
Lads in particular, but they, it's a rite of passage for them.
Right.
And to have a just cause is even better. So I was having to come up against organised and disorganised groups of racists who would be wanting to attack kids. They'd come onto the school. I remember one occasion that there's about 8 of them came on. They had things with them and that, and there was just me and another guy, deputy head teacher, and then all the kids were on the yard about 100 yards away. And so I thought, well, we have to stop them getting across, because there'll be carnage.
Right.
And I remember walking up to the lads and I said, right, Brian, you go to the 4 on the right. Well, that's not his real name. And I looked around, he'd gone. He'd left me on my own.
Right.
Discretion being the better part of valour. And so I managed to make the boys laugh, these lads, at me. And
these were white lads?
Yeah,
or?
white lads.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they cleared off. They just decided it wasn't worth beating me up, and they left, which was nice. But I mean, just giving a measure of the kind of attitudes. We had one boy there, lovely bad, special needs lad, who hung himself. He was in year 9, and he died. And he thought he would go to see Mufasa from
Lion King.
And we had to deal with that in the community. I went to Janazah and everything else, and then on a billboard in Stoke, somebody had written up in big black felt tip, R.I.P. then the boy's name.
Right.
1 down, 1 million more to go.
Okay.
Now that you can imagine how that played out in the community, and rightly so. So that was the kind of thing that we were dealing with, and it's also at about that time, and it was at that time when the murder of Ahmadullah Iqbal took place in Burnage. He was again, I think, a boy in year 9, and another lad called Darren Coulson stabbed him to death in the playground.
Right.
There was a massive inquiry, the McDonald report, I think it was. There have been so many inquiries. I think it was the McDonald, and it unearthed a sort of a catalogue of problems in the inner city.
Right.
And I remember being in that school in Stoke-on-Trent and saying to a colleague, "We don't want another Burnage here," because a white lad who was in care, had been put into the school, and he'd taken a knife and he'd slammed it at an Asian boy, and it had gone between his legs and stuck in the chair.
Right.
And that's when we said we don't want another Burnage here, because we were worried about the level of overt racism, and you had Stephen Lawrence taking place at that time.
Yeah.
In the 70s, 80s, and I'm going to use words now which are inappropriate, but like queer bashing was a regular sport.
Yeah.
And then Paki bashing.
Yeah.
These are all. This was just de rigueur. It's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that you don't have people being murdered now because of their ethnicity. Of course you do, but it was very much more overt, and I'm not going to say acceptable, but it was in your face much more than it is now. Now, when you look at people in power, one of the problems is that I think there's a truth that people tend to appoint in their own image. So if you're looking to work with somebody, there is a tendency.
Familiarity. Yes.
Men appoint men that look like them as these are broad generalizations,
totally,
but that helps explain why it is that you have, this sort of difficulty in people who aren't a part of that demographic breaking in. You just take the example of football. I mean, there were no black footballers in the 70s. I mean, there was Clyde Best for West Ham, and then you had Laurie Cunningham, and I shouldn't be able to name them. Now, you have teams like Crystal Palace that are almost entirely black.
Absolutely,
And so these things, so it's different and it's changed. And I think one of the big influences that changed young people in the 70s and 80s, I hope I'm not boring you.
No.
Was music.
It's fascinating to hear, where we started off and how quickly it's progressed, and your kind of like what comes out is your overall observation of the change, the system, the way it worked, and the systems very openly accepting that racism, or even, as you said, the homophobic, the kind of things that unacceptable at the time, and how times have changed in some things which have become so acceptable, but in other places where there has been no change at all when you really look at it.
Yeah, it's not uniform, is it? I mean, it's quite. So you have a Chancellor of the Exchequer who is of Asian heritage, and I think one of the things which people really shy away from is the points at which race and class meet. And so much, what used to make me quite quizzical about a lot of the racism that I used to come across is that the people who were so racist had an awful lot in common with the people they hated.
Right.
They did the same jobs or didn't. They lived in the same areas. They were in the same income bracket or lack of it. And and so class is an issue which, the BBC for many years wouldn't talk about class. It was something, we can't use the C word, and they meant class. We can't. It's kind of like, oh no, it's too hot a topic. But class is so important, so influential in every aspect of our society. And then when you layer that with racism, with Islamophobia, with all the other isms that there are there, you have a very complex cocktail which is hard to unpick. And there is no single pill. There isn't a simple answer. And too often we go for simple answers, or we go for really complex answers. So you just take child protection. I mean, every time a child is killed by neglect or whatever, if it's particularly popular in the press, there'll be an inquiry. And I can tell you now what the inquiry will find.
Right.
It'll find a lack of communication between the agencies. Right. What they never say is there is chronic underfunding in our society, in the caring professions, in the service sector. It's chronically underfunded. Our health service is chronically underfunded. They won't say any of that. What they do is they move the jack chairs around and said, well, let's have a board, a children's board, or let's have this and let's have that. And yet 5-10 years later, there'll be another report come out, exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see what comes out of the Manchester Arena inquiry.
Which was being kind of, not celebrated, but remembered yesterday. Very sad occasion. Ian, we're going to take a quick break now, and give you a chance to recover as well. And we'll be back. People, wherever you are listening, stay tuned. You're listening to Salam BCR with me, Haq4Haq, and my guest here in the studio is Ian Douglas Fenn. We'll discover more about Ian. I didn't need to prompt Ian very much here, and it's amazing, how much we find. There's a progression in the story here, and I hope you'll stay tuned. If you have any questions, if you want to ask any question, I'm sure he'll be happy to oblige. Our number is 07990264144. 07990264144. That's our WhatsApp number, and on that you can either message us or call. And the other one is 01612219872. 01612219872. You don't worry if you can't speak English. I will translate for you. But we would obviously appreciate a call just to let our guests know that people are listening in. Stay tuned. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back after this.
सुन रहे हो? जी हाँ, इसी तरह हजारों और भी सुनने वाले हैं। आपके कारोबार की कामयाबी का राज सलाम BCR। सुनते रहिए सलाम BCR।
Things are slowly getting back to normal after living a very different life alongside COVID-19. as we go about our daily life spending more time with friends and family, shopping and visiting the mosque, there are things we can do to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe while COVID-19 is still in our communities. Here's a few things we can all do to look after each other. Wear a face mask if it makes you feel more comfortable when mixing indoors or in a crowded place. Fresh air is a great protector against COVID-19. Keep your home or workplace well ventilated. Open windows to let COVID-19 particles out and fresh air in. As the weather gets warmer, why not meet people outside? It's the simple things that make a difference, like continuing to wash our hands regularly, using a tissue to cover and catch coughs and sneezes, and staying at home if we feel unwell. You can still get your vaccine and the boosters. Visit the NHS website or call 119 to find out all your options. Why not ask them about the pharmacies across Bury offering a vaccine service?
This is Project Radio, online, on air, everywhere.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मैं हूं जान रेम्बो और आप मेरी आवाज़ इस वक्त जिस रेडियो स्टेशन पर सुन रहे हैं उसका नाम है इस्लाम पीसीआर। इस्लाम पीसीआर की तमाम टीम को और तमाम सुनने वालों को मेरा प्यार भरा सलाम। तो सुनते रहिए इस्लाम पीसीआर।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम प्यारे दोस्तों, मैं सखावत नाज ते सुनते रहो सलाम बीसीआर।
मैं हनी अलबेला, सुनते रहिए सलाम बीसीआर।
Want to be on radio? Then log into our website www.project29.org.uk and email me Aidan for more details.
हमारा मिशन अल्लाह की रज़ा, मोहम्मद से वफा, पाकिस्तान का दिफा। हम हैं सलाम बीसीआर।
या नबी सलाम अलैका, या रसूल सलाम अलैका, सलावतुल्लाह अलैका, या रसूल सलाम अलैका, या नबी सलाम अलैका, या रसूल सलाम अलैका। रौनके जिंदगी आप है रौनके जिंदगी आप है रौनके जिंदगी आप है रौनके जिंदगी आप है मेरी सारी खुशी आप है मेरी सारी खुशी आप है जिंदगी आप है रौनके जिंदगी आप है मेरे दामन में ज़ारा की खैरात है मेरे दामन में ज़ारा की खैरात है क्यों हो मुझको कमी आप है क्यों हो मुझको कमी आप है रौनके जिंदगी आप है रौनके जिंदगी आप है कौन है रहमते दो जहां कौन है रहमते दो जहां या नबी आप है या
या नबी आप हैं जिंदगी आप हैं रौनके जिंदगी आप हैं शाह है बरशिकन शामिल
Assalamu alaikum, people. Welcome back. You're listening to Salam BCR, or welcome back after the break. I have my guest here with me, Ian Douglas Fenn. And as you probably heard him say, Muslim. I was hoping that we would keep that till later on. But let's just find out what was the reason, how the transition, how he became a Muslim, and then we'll move on to the progression in the career, which obviously has led Ian traveling, involved in a lot of organizations for one reason or other, and we'd like to find out from Ian his personal experience. Ian, welcome back after the break, my friend. Ian Douglas Fenn and Muhammad Yusuf Fenn.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Oh, it's a long story. It's 7 years, you know. So it wasn't, you know, a Pauline conversion on the road to Damascus. It wasn't something that happened very quickly. It was something that I remember I was noticing that a lot of the racism that existed against children in Stoke-on-Trent was based on misunderstandings of faith and culture.
Okay.
But I wasn't clear on the difference between the two.
Right.
Clearly, because why would I be? So I went to the local mosque as a part of my trying to get them to engage, and vice versa. Then the mosque was much more willing than the school, it turned out. But anyhow, and there's a man there, Mr. Siddiqui, and he gave me a copy of the Quran.
Right.
By Arbery, one of the, you know, it's not a very good translation to be fair, but it was one that he gave me, and I was grateful. And he just said, look, you know, if you read this, when you finish reading this, you'll be a Muslim. And I said, yeah, of course I will. Yeah. And he said, the only thing I said, don't drink alcohol when you read this, and just make sure you're clean. You're not all grubby and dirty, and that's it. And he left me with the book.
Okay.
So I then went through it. I can speed read. You know, nature of my job over the years, I really can. But it took me years to read this because it wasn't something you speed read.
No, of course not. To grasp it, understand it, take it in.
To have some inkling of what it might mean for oneself.
Yes.
You know, and the death of my father was still raw.
Right.
You know, there's something you come to terms with loss. That's of course you do. But I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not important. And I remember there's one little phrase in the Quran which resonated, which was, "I've given no soul more than it can endure," and that was something which stuck with me.
Right.
And then over time, and particularly by working with some people who were very good examples of practicing Muslims. In other words, they weren't bothered about the ritual.
Right.
You know, they were not hung up on the length of your trousers. They were much more interested in good deeds, in making a difference, making a change, getting people engaged in the community with education. I think of one man, Feman Elahi, from Birmingham, who was an education welfare officer that I used to work very closely with.
Right.
And he was an outstanding individual, very nice family, and very welcoming. But it was this sort of this commitment to making a difference, which I found very, very helpful in my understanding of what I wanted to be, who I wanted to be, and what I wanted to do.
Okay. As a human being, no, as a teacher.
Yeah, as a human being.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I think Gustav Mahler said, religion is not about worshipping the ashes; it's about fanning the flame. And that is something which, you know, I have taken to heart, and has allowed me in my spiritual journey to go from a huge amount of confusion to less confusion, but no certainty, but just a kind of an understanding of how to behave.
Okay.
And I took that into my work,
Right.
and I found that what I wanted to do was to dedicate myself to working with underprivileged, particularly Muslims, because that was a group that I could understand.
Okay.
I was less keen to work with schools which were very mixed or easy schools. So when I became a deputy head, one of those 3 applications I put in, it was in Denton.
Right.
And so we moved up to Denton, and I got on really well with the head. They're still a friend of mine, but I really didn't like it. There was no challenge, even though it was
the particular school.
Yeah, it was. There were very few,
being deputy head
at the school.
Right.
And I'm not really big on titles. It's what you can do with it, and it was, and it wasn't. I suddenly came to realise that it's horses for courses, and that which I take to mean that for me, my take on faith, my take on work, on where I'm going to be successful, is particular to me. That I'm not somebody you could put in charge of Manchester Grammar and expect it to work. It wouldn't. I'd be a failure, because that is not what I'm interested in. That is not what you wouldn't ask a goalkeeper to play centre forward. Yeah, it's what I came to understand made me so driven was this working with the so-called worst. And that's where I ended up eventually. There was a time in the late 90s where it seemed to me quite acceptable that you could have parallel societies. You could have Muslims living very much like you see some of other religious groups living almost their own identity, separate. I'm thinking now of some of the Jewish communities that I drive through, where it's very identifiable. This is the area, this is how they are, and I thought that would work very well for Muslims as well. I in fact became head of an all-Muslim boys' school,
right,
in Manchester, and that's how I got headship. On the idea that the need to engage with the main society was okay, but you do it through being friendly, and that you didn't actually have to get your hands dirty. You didn't actually get that involved. You could put things on for them to draw them to you, but you wouldn't necessarily engage in with them.
Right.
And I came to realise very quickly that was false, and that the vast majority of people from our faith and from our communities, they live in the middle of everyone else. And to take the idea that you can have a kind of it might work with a small group, it cannot work with 7% of the population or whatever it is, and nor should it. And also, I've always been interested in history. My study of early Islam and of everything else, made me to realise that it isn't about separation. It isn't about exclusivity. It's about inclusivity. It's about people sharing with each other, not necessarily trying to become each other at all. Because Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he never tried to convert a Christian. That I'm aware of. Exactly. It's kind of, and at the battle, I think it was the Battle of Badr, he entrusted his army. The guide was a Christian.
Right.
Now you wouldn't do that if you thought that you couldn't engage with other faiths. So anyhow,
humanitarian values. It's about us as people, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our values, personal values.
Absolutely. You know, your faith is, you have your faith, I have mine. It's fine.
You and your,
it's what floats your boat. But we're still at the end of the day. We have red blood. We have a pulse.
Yes.
You know, and we share more than we don't. Or we should.
Absolutely.
And so the opportunity came to take on Burnage.
Right.
Which was
a challenge.
Yeah. It was. I mean, I think I only got the job because nobody else wanted it. You know, there was not a big field, and they only took me through to the second day.
Right.
Because there was a 2-day for headships, always 2 days, and I was quite shocked. And I thought, well, there must be. You know, how many of us are there going to be? And just me went through to the second day.
Right.
So, you know, at that point, I started to think I might get the job because I didn't think I had a chance.
Right.
But I was appointed, and I became head on the 1st of January, 2001.
Right.
Of a school.
2001.
Yeah.
2001.
01.
Interesting. So now you are a Muslim, a white Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose with the Muslim communities. Very acceptable. You've become one of them.
No.
Oh.
No. I mean,
alienated by both sides now.
Not necessarily. I mean, most people treat converts as better than them, which is deeply annoying. But at the end of the day, I'm white.
Yes.
And that is something which people within the communities, some people in the communities regard as other. You are other. You
are other?
Other, yes. You're not one of us. You are other. You're Muslim, yes. Oh, you're wonderful, and you're better than us because you converted. You chose.
Oh, right.
But you're other.
Okay.
So and that otherness doesn't manifest itself in hatred. You're just treated differently.
And do you find that?
That doesn't worry me.
No, but
I accept it. I understand it. Nowadays I've become so much more sanguine and so much more. It takes a lot to upset me. I just sort of get over it. You know, I've been there, done that. I've seen worse. I've had worse. So I'm not gonna. You know, when you've picked up a child's body.
Yeah.
You know, you know, other things tend to fall in perspective.
Did you know? I keep thinking that the reason why you came into what you came into as a teacher, almost became a social worker. Rather than a teacher. We have a caller. We have Mr. Liaquat Ali who's on the phone. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Yusuf.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Yes. I'm actually listening to what you're describing, your working life and how you became Muslim and how you've been treated by Muslim. And I think I'm a bit disappointed by my own Muslim community that they actually gave you that kind of, impression that you're the other one. You know, I can assure you, you're not the other one. You are one of us.
I totally. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've always been treated like a prince, but that is not how one should treat somebody. Or, you should be treated just like anyone else. And and many times I'm treated better than I should be.
I think what happens is a little bit of culture crept in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
In our community, I think what we do is we give extra respect to somebody like your good self who's actually studied Islam and then accepted it. What happens is we are actually born. Luckily, we were born in the Muslim community, and we take it for granted. And I do realize personally that when you actually study other religion, it is very difficult, to actually understand properly. But I think you mastered that side, and I think you actually became Muslim after studying Islam and also talking to the Muslims friends and family, and I think that actually convinced you. Yeah, that's the right path to take. Which is actually.
I would want you to think.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about the Pakistani community. I'm talking about Muslims. So the worst behaviour, I suppose, I've received is with people who are not of Asian origin. In terms
Middle
of
Eastern?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. They have this kind of howdy-towdy thing about them. What I have always found superior,
I mean, you will find good and bad wherever you look, and I've met Saudis and I've met Libyans and you name it, from any part of the world who've been like brothers to me. But by the same token, when you're dealing with the hierarchy in some of these countries, it doesn't play well to be a white Muslim. So,
I'm surprised to hear that, Brother Yusuf. I think, whenever actually visited Arab countries, then you actually start talking to the ordinary folks there, and
I'm not referring to the ordinary
actually,
folk. I'm not referring to the ordinary folk.
Yeah.
I work with organisations where I'd be dealing with people at the top.
Yes.
So at a not ordinary people. The ordinary people I've met at work have been by and large wonderful. Such lovely, welcoming. I mean, people who Libyan people who would run 100 miles for me, Syrians, refugees from all over the world. No, I'm talking about a governmental level where you're treated better if you're a white person who's not a Muslim than if you're a convert.
So do you think that you're suspiciously that is it suspicion of some sort?
No, I'm told. I've been told very clearly. Right now, don't give salam. Don't mention your faith.
Okay. Why?
Because it doesn't play well. If you're trying to negotiate with people of influence in a certain country, and they like white people who are not Muslim.
So you find sorry, just to interject here. So is it their complex of inferiority in themselves?
I haven't got a clue.
Because what I find is when I look at the Emirates Airlines, for example, you look at the top brass. They're all European, American, or British.
It won't be Muslim.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I sometimes makes me wonder that in opportunities where you would find that they would more want to give opportunities to, if not just for one direction, everybody equally. But you find that it must be, that's what I find, maybe I'm wrong, that they have this inferiority, less capable.
I don't know. I don't know why it is that I was always advised,
Can I just come in there?
Yes, please.
I think what it is the way I studied them is that they think if you spoke English and you are not a Muslim, then they give you extra respect because you're the guy who knows it all and you're going to help us. And I think that's how they actually see you, that you're the guy who can resolve some of our problems or difficulties we have in the country, or you can improve their lives.
So by becoming a Muslim, you've lost that capability?
I think what happens is that they haven't realized, and I think I take the point Brother Yusuf is making. He gets the feeling, when he's told not to actually tell them that you're Muslim and just speak English or French or whatever, then you'll be all right. And it's a wrong thing to do, in my opinion. It shouldn't be like that at all.
Anyway, well, thank you, Brother Liaquat. Thank you so much for your... anything else you would like to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Brother Yusuf and I actually been the out of hours registrar for a number of years, and we actually worked together quite amicably.
Yeah.
Is that right, Brother Yusuf?
Yes. You were a dream.
Fantastic. Lovely. Well, two colleagues from far, and then now we've joined you up here on Salam VCR. Excellent, Brother Liaquat. Inshallah. Thank you, Mera Pera. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Take care and Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Wa alaikum
Thank you.
assalam. Maybe you know, when you know what, so I should not be too flattered when non-Muslims come here and they say salam alaikum. I should say to them, no, you shouldn't. You should say good morning, good afternoon, whatever. But so from you moved into Manchester,
Yes.
and you know, obviously ended up at Burnage, and when we came to 2001,
Yeah.
Life changed.
Yeah, it did.
Life changed considerably for. I think the world changed.
It did.
The world changed.
Yeah, I barely got my feet under the table when 9/11 took place. But I think it had a much. We were dealing with gangs. That's what we were dealing with at the time. People were having kids shot all the time. Not in school,
right?
But in the community.
Community.
You know, you hear on the local news, a child had been shot, and then I'd get on the phone straight away and find, is he one of ours? You know, and every year the answer would be yes.
And on the phone to whom?
Well, to my people who I embedded within the community.
Oh, right, okay.
So you know, it was terribly important that we had outreach workers.
Oh, right.
And who could go anywhere in the community perfectly safely.
Yeah.
You know, they could go into gang areas and nobody would say a word to them. In fact, they bow their heads with their shame. You know, that because what would happen in those days is if you went onto the Anson estate, for example, there would be lookouts, and they'd stop you.
Okay.
If they didn't know you.
Right.
And I remember one of my workers being stopped, and they realised it was her.
Right.
And she gave them a right ear bashing.
Right.
And they were so embarrassed because they should have realised that she was safe and she should be allowed through.
Okay.
Those were very hard times. And, you know, you're dealing... It wasn't just my school. I mean, other schools were having similar things, but we had significant problems that was impacting. So that was, to us, that was more significant than 9/11.
Right.
The 9/11 thing, the first thing we did there was, I suppose, we had to react when the invasion of, was it Afghanistan took place? I can't remember now. Iraq, yeah, the Iraq invasion, that was it. And we had Iraqi boys in the school.
Right.
So I think we had Panorama came.
Right.
And they did a thing, you know, what's it like, you know, your country's at war, you're not, kind of thing. And, I wasn't involved in that other than to set it up.
Right.
And I thought it was important that the voice of people from those countries who were in our community, been living here, you know, if it should be heard by them, not from me.
Yeah.
So that was the main thing that's happened there. It all changed with 7/7 in London, and then the fear level locally and nationally went through the roof because it was no longer a video game. It was no longer something happening over there.
Somewhere else.
Yeah, somewhere else. It was here, and it's very much like Ukraine now. It's closer, and people can identify much better with them than they can with Afghanistan.
Well, I can just to add that, if I may, I remember, you know, obviously with my job, often going down to London for auditions and one thing and another. That was one particular time around about then when I really considered, you know, I would never take a rucksack with me. I'd never take a shoulder bag with me. You know, always, you know, you have your script, whatever. So you take it in a kind of a folder that doesn't look suspicious, wouldn't cause, you know, too much overtly interest. It was very, very difficult times. So I can imagine, you know, and this is you know, a grown man having kind of like a considerable experience. But for young kids, it must have been a very difficult time as well. I mean, you know, a lot of what I think, Ian, is identifying yourself. Where do you sit in society when the media is feeding this frenzy about them and us?
I think it affected adults much more than children. It's bizarrely. I mean, our kids, the future to them, you know, is tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, it's so far ahead. That's not going to happen till tomorrow. So they live in the moment. They don't think ahead. I had people I knew who were terrified that they were going to get pulled out of their beds, and I said, "Look, you're not in third world. You're not in Pakistan or somewhere like that where that will happen. There's a process here. Don't worry, you'll be fine.
Sorry again. Once you see, there you are. I can relate to that. I often feared you became suspicious of the people that you were supposed to trust.
Yeah.
You know that you might that if they want to point something at you, you know they could pull you up and find something in the boot of your car.
Yeah.
I swear, that's the kind of suspicion that that brings home for me, and I'm finding that really fascinating.
Well, it was. I mean, put it like this: I had one friend of mine who was a close friend, I was less of a close friend, but with Jamal al-Harith.
Right.
And now he was in Guantanamo Bay.
Right.
He'd been picked up in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And shipped out to Guantanamo. And he was somebody. And I'm conflating two stories now. I'll come back to him in a bit.
Shall we take a break and then see?
Yeah. I'm conflating two stories.
Yeah. No worries. Assalamu alaikum, people. You're listening to Salam BCR, and I have my guest here with me, Ian D. Fenn, and Muhammad Yusuf Fenn, as we now know also. Just reminiscing, maybe recounting experiences from as coming into the teaching profession, and the places, discoveries, personal experiences led, and then what we're leading to now is, after 9/11, 7/7, life changed considerably, and we'll talk to Yusuf how it changed his personal thinking, as well as real life experiences maybe he might share of which might be useful for our listeners, and especially if there's any young people listening, they can relate to it, now having lived through that time, and some of the older people that might have had those suspicions. So if you've been engaged in anything like that, you've suffered, or you've kind of like faced that kind of problem, then we'd love to hear from you. Salam BCR, medium wave 1566, number 07990264 0790264 or 01612219872. I always find it kind of like suspicious that when people when we're doing a program in English, that our listeners seem to quieten down. आपको ना कोई ज़्यादा ज़रूरत नहीं है कि आप चुपचाप रहें. अगर आप अंग्रेज़ी कोई अच्छा नहीं आपका, तो मैं आपसे दरख्वास्त करूँगा कि आप फ़ोन कीजिए, अपना सवाल या अपनी कोई भी जो सोच है हमारे साथ उर्दू में शेयर कर लीजिए, पंजाबी में शेयर कर लीजिए. तो I will try and explain to Brother Yusuf what the question is, but we'd love to hear you. As I said, particularly because those people that were growing up in that time, 9/11, 7/7, and having experienced these changes, but more so how life has changed for people here since. Give us a call, 07990264144. We're going to take a quick break, and inshallah we'll be back after this. Suntari Salam BCR, आपका अपना very local radio.
Spot Blue International Property Agents. Looking for property in Dubai or Turkey? We have hundreds of selected properties to suit every client. If you're looking for investment property or owner-occupier, then let Spot Blue hold your hand and buy with confidence. Spot Blue, the international property experts who understand your language. Spot Blue. For a full list of properties available across the globe, check our website spotblue.com or phone 0208 339 6036. That number again, 0208 339 6036, and across all social media platforms. Spot Blue.
हमारा मिशन अल्लाह की रजा, मोहम्मद से वफा, पाकिस्तान का दिफा, हम हैं सलाम BCR.
Assalamu alaikum, I'm Mufti Taiba and you're listening to Salam BCR on medium wave 1566 and on salambcr.com. Please join me every Saturday 3 to 5 p.m. for a variety of Islamic related topics and Q&As.
मैं लोगों से मोहब्बत में अनाएं छोड़ देता हूँ, वफाएं याद रखता हूँ, जफाएं छोड़ देता हूँ. अस्सलाम वालेकुम दोस्तों, मैं हूँ इफ्तिखार रफी, एक्टर, राइटर, शायर और कॉलम नवीस, वीलॉगर फ्रॉम पाकिस्तान. और सलाम BCR, जी हाँ, ये है नया रेडियो चैनल जिस पे आप मेरी आवाज़ सुन रहे हैं.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मैं शहजाद पप्पू, आप सुन रहे हैं सलाम BCR.
Salam BCR, medium wave 1566 and online. Your home of entertainment. Broadcasting across Greater Manchester and beyond. Check our website, project29.org.uk.
क्या आप अपने कारोबार को फलता फूलता देखना चाहते हैं? अगर आपका जवाब हाँ में है तो आज ही इस्लाम BCR से राब्ता करें। फोन 0791262291।
सामाइन वेलकम बैक आफ्टर द ब्रेक। आप सुन रहे सलाम BCR और मैं हूं आपका मेज़बान हक4Haq। हमारा साथ रहेगा 7 बजे तक, जबकि भाई फरीद साहब आएंगे अपना प्रोग्राम लेकर। अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह माशाल्लाह पिछले हफ्ते उन्होंने तो ज़बरदस्त हमें भी इतना यानी कि क्या कहते हैं सरप्राइज़ कर दिया कि उनका प्रोग्राम जिस हद से वो नॉर्मली करते हैं, तब्दीली मेरा ख्याल उनमें भी तब्दीली आ गई है। तब्दीली आ नहीं रही, उनमें भी तब्दीली आ गई। और जैसे पाकिस्तान में तब्दीली आपको पता आजकल जा रही है, लेकिन आज हम उसके बारे में बातचीत नहीं करेंगे, वो तब्दीली के बारे में कल ये शायद मौजूद चलता रहेगा। Brother Yusuf, we came and Guantanamo suddenly came up in the conversation. A lot of people were being picked up around the world. Rendition flights.
Yes.
People picked up without any
due process.
How do we? You've personally known people, experienced people. Tell us a bit about your experiences there. How this all went about.
Well, I employed somebody when I was the head of KD Grammar.
KD Grammar
in Manchester. It was a Muslim boys' independent school,
right?
Which was before Burnage,
right?
And I employed Jamal there and he was a convert, West Indian, Afro-Caribbean. I employed him, I think, with IT and reception, I think it was.
Right.
So I that's how I got to know him. Then he ended up being rendered from Kabul, where he'd gone, to Guantanamo.
Right.
So I was asked by Special Branch to tell him everything I knew about him, his character and everything else. And it just so happened that one of the people who I had with me employed at Burnage had been to school with him, was a friend of his. So they special branch interviewed the pair of us, and we gave as honest an appraisal as we could. Turned out to be wrong, because he killed himself in Mosul. He blew himself up in Mosul, but there for the grace of anyhow. So that was sort of one of my experiences. But the before that, one of my friends who I'd known many years was being asked by Special Branch to talk about a residential course he'd been on in Yorkshire, where one of the 7/7 bombers had been present.
Right.
And there were 30 people on this residential course, and Special Branch wanted to interview him about it, and he was terrified. It's sort of, what do? I don't want to talk to them because, what's going to happen? And I said, look, if you don't talk to them, you're a person of interest. You have to talk to them because, otherwise they're going to assume that you've something to hide. And of course, if you have experience of judicial systems where the judge can be bought for, for a sum of money,
goats.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you have got out of your car in Lahore and taken off your shoe and beaten up the police officer for stopping you,
right,
because the police officer didn't realise who you were.
Yeah.
If that's your experience, then the experience when you over here, you have a kind of you're not necessarily sure how safe it's going to be to engage with the authorities. So I said, I'll come with you. And so I went to his house. Special Branch came round, and they wanted to know who had been on that residential course X number of years before.
Right.
It was years before, because they identified 29 of the 30, and there's one person they couldn't identify. That's how thorough they were.
Right.
And he did what he could, and that was the last he heard of it.
Right.
But to me, what's of interest is not the thoroughness of Special Branch, because you'd hope that they are thorough. It's the way in which they are portrayed, and authorities are portrayed by people from the community at that time, because it was terrifying. It was terrifying. And that's the first time I spoke to the media. They contacted me, the South Manchester Reporter, no less, contacted me and said, "You're a Muslim, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." So what do you think of the bombing? So I said, "Well," so I told them what I thought about that this was not Islam. This is not what this is nothing to do with the message of the faith, but something quite different. And that was front page all over there. Muslim head. I can't remember what it was. It's basically attacks terrorists, or condemns. That would be condemns terrorists.
Right.
And I felt it was important then that particularly for me, I was safe as houses. With my background, I had no fear at all about the security services, about what then became the prevent agenda. To me, the worst thing you can do when you have something like that is nothing. It's to hide, is to shut up the shop and think, to be suspicious of everything, because then that would breed suspicion from the authorities. To me, it was about engaging with them. So when the prevent agenda came, which was much misunderstood, I became very quickly involved. I suppose because I had a bit of a reputation for working with the gangs, trying to defeat the gangs, so community work, but also, of course, through being a Muslim and a head teacher in an area that was a tier 1 area, which is what Manchester was. It was sort of like right on the top of the list of places they worried about. So I sort of came in at the ground floor of what was prevent agenda. And it was the blind leading the blind. None of us had a clue. I was reminded of it when this pandemic hit, when the coronavirus hit, the COVID-19. None of us, now we've got the monkeypox. We're all chasing our tails, not knowing what to do. It was exactly the same then. This had not happened before. And I went down for a security briefing in London, and somebody high up in the security services said, during the troubles with the IRA, there were, and he gave a number, like 312, whatever it was, terrorists. We knew who they were. We knew where they lived. We knew what their jobs were. We knew what they did. But they still managed to set off all these bombs.
Yeah.
At the moment, we do not know how many terrorists there are, who they are, where they are, what they're planning, what they're going to do. We know nothing.
Right.
And that is the challenge that is facing us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when he said us, he meant his side, the investigative, the preventing people from doing these things.
Yeah.
But there was a role for other agencies to help prevent. And for us, it's much more long term.
Right.
It's about, if you do nothing, you do not make the problem any better, you make it worse. So, for example, and these are not comparable, but I'm going to have to use it as a comparator. Teenage pregnancy, right? A lot of girls would get pregnant because they thought that they couldn't get pregnant the first time, or there all sorts of myths around what could and couldn't happen.
Right.
Then you had proper or more informed sex education, and the number of pregnancies for those reasons declined.
Okay.
So, similarly, many people now do not smoke who used to smoke. Many young people will not smoke because of the education that they've had, not just in school, but in society and everywhere else. So if you educate people, you have a chance of influencing the choices that they make.
Right.
Some people will carry on smoking. Some young women will get pregnant. These things will carry on. We would do a lot of work on knife crime.
Right.
We would have the police officer come in. We would show the knives. I used to have a drawer full of knives and koshes in my desk at Burnage in 2001, 2002. A drawer full of weapons.
Right.
But just because people carried on getting stabbed doesn't mean that that was a waste of time, because some people will have listened. Maybe when they're 30 or when they've got their own kids, having gone through, listened to our messages, carried a knife, used a knife, they might think, no, that's wrong, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So when you're educating, you're not expecting instant results.
Yeah.
It's not like a driving test, pass or fail. It's for life.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I was asked to get involved with Prevent, and I said, well, what we need to be doing, is like almost threefold. We need to be looking at what we teach and how we teach it. And so we need to be using opportunities where they exist in the curriculum to challenge terrorism.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you are doing an English lesson on newspaper reporting, which is a standard lesson that's done in the Key Stage 3 and elsewhere, you get a copy of The Sun, you get a copy of the Morning Star, you get a copy of the Guardian, you put them up and you see, that the Morning Star's headline is about sort of tomato production in Bulgaria. The Sun is about somebody's being caught bed hopping, and the Times will be about, the state of the economy. But if you use the newspapers to see how they dealt with things like the Manchester bombing, and you unpick that, you are able then to address the whole aspects around terrorism and extremism through the curriculum. And similarly, one of the things I got involved with at this time was an excellent foundation who had produced materials, a book called 1001 Inventions, which I think you've got, which is about the enormous contribution that people from the Middle East and Muslim heritage have made to science. So, for example, my favourite one is, cataract operation. The operation to remove your cataract was first done about 500 years ago. And they could remove cataracts from people's eyes. I sit at home watching daytime TV because I have nothing better to do, and I will see adverts for asking for money to remove cataracts from children and people in Africa. And that's and yet that operation was piloted in Africa by Muslims 500 odd years ago. And when you say that you show that to people irrespective of their background, that we have a shared humanity right? It's not them and us, right? Isaac Newton said, if I have seen further than others, it's because I have stood on the shoulders of giants.
No.
Right? And it's that, why do what do the Arabs call their numerals? They call them Indian numerals. We call them Arab numerals. They call them Indian numerals because they come from India.
Right.
All right? They added 0.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
And when you suddenly realize that that what was done in China 3,000 years ago, had a massive impact on, gunpowder was invented in China. I'm not saying it was a good thing. It bloody well wasn't. But having said that, without it, Constantinople would never have become Istanbul. So it's using all the tools in a school to confront the preachers of hate, either directly or indirectly.
Something that comes to mind, you see, you mentioned this education. Was education is a wonderful thing, and no doubt it is. But I'm just now digressing from where you were at, what I think I'd like to look at.
Yeah.
In that education right now and media is the biggest educator or influencer that we have right now. And not necessarily for the better, for all around. It doesn't, for me, reflect or give a fair reflection for people to make a choice. It rather not covertly but overtly influencing them to this big campaign of what their agenda at the end of the day is. Number one is there needs to be an enemy of the state, and right now there is one enemy, and I'm not talking about Russia. I'm talking about Islam as a general. When we look at media, it's Islamization, Islamism. So and I'm worried for the future of the kids right now in education, and I find that a lot of the Asian kids, or from the Muslim background, and I say Asian because that's the majority. They're very very much out of it. They're not really fully aware of this agenda. And whilst in the mainstream media we get fed this, and I find that people from the use of a word white community and their kids, they discuss it at home and they see it, and therein then becomes a problem of them and us. How do we actually paint a fairer reflection of a fairer picture of what actually is than demonizing people?
It's a very long, gradual process, and as
Are we on the right road?
I am unsure. I'm not sure what approaches work, because I'm a little bit, well, not a little bit. I'm terrified by the speed of change, and that things. You use the word influence, which is what I think is the best word to use. We have people now who influence through falsehoods, and knowingly through falsehoods, and who are not at all ashamed about the fact that they lie. I mean, Trump is possibly the best example, simply because he contradicts himself with every breath, and you can see that he will make a rhetorical question like, people out there know, and so if that agrees with what you think, yeah, they do. Absolute balderdash. The truth is almost become meaningless. And in terms of Islamophobia, and I think that there's many perceived enemies out there. I think there's almost an industry in it, and I think at the moment that Russia is taking the
bulk of
it's the focus. It'll be something else at some point. The level of ignorance that exists in society is enormous, because if you think about it, you go back through time and it would take several days for news. Like the person who bet on the Battle of Waterloo's outcome became a multimillionaire. He managed to get the message back from the battlefield before everyone else, and he was able to sell or buy whatever it was on the market in London.
Right.
Became a millionaire because of that time lag. Now, false news, lies, get through to us in an instant.
Yes.
So that people are able to demonize Islam, Judaism, anything that they want to, really, really quickly, and they don't actually need facts. They don't need truth. They just need a perception of truth, or they just need to say. I mean, it's the old adage: if you say something enough times, people will start to believe it.
Yeah.
And that is, I'm afraid, and of course, it's not help when people react in an extreme way. So, for example, I remember a case now, which is a real case, a true case. I got, when I was start my time at Burnage, I was asked by the police to give them the address of somebody, and they gave me a name.
Right.
And it was a first name.
Okay.
And I went through our registers, and there was only one person with that name.
Right.
So I gave that information to the police. They went, we're talking over 20 years ago. They went round, that person was grabbed, was thrown in a prison cell, was kept for I don't know how long. And it turned out they got the wrong person completely. And the person the police wanted, unbeknownst to me, had changed his first name a term before. So the register didn't pick up that name because he changed it.
Yeah.
Now, if that had been your son who'd been dragged out of his bed at 2 o'clock in the morning and thrown, how would you react?
Well, yes.
Not well.
No,
I'm
well,
assuming.
no.
I'm assuming you might, and you might actually want to have a conversation with me and want to know why the hell I'd done what I'd done, and perhaps even with my chair of governors or with the press or with the media, and gone for me. That father came to me and was so full of understanding and forgiveness, and his reaction to a wrong was love,
forgiveness.
Right?
Okay.
Now it just so happens he was a convert to Islam. He was West Indian. His wife was Asian.
Yeah.
But he was so. I was humbled. You see, and it's people like that who I mean, I've not thought about this guy now for God knows how many years, but when I dredge through my memories, people like that have more of an influence on you than you realise, because I then realised that frequently, I mean, I remember standing in front of a man with "Made in England" tattooed across his forehead, with an Alsatian dog on a leash going mental, with his friends and relatives holding lumps of wood. And I had about 100 of my lads who I'd stopped just by telling him to stop moving.
Right.
And I looked him in the eye, and what are you going to say to somebody outside their house when they've just attacked some of my boys? They picked on some Afghani refugees. Big mistake.
Right.
They don't fear death. All right. They is that it? Is that what So I had to tell them to stop.
Yeah.
And they did, because they respect. They will stop. They'll do what the teacher says.
Yeah.
And so this granddad, he was a granddad who was with all his tats on his face. I said, you and I both want the same thing, don't we? We just want there to be peace and tranquility. And he just didn't know how to react. It was, and I got that part of me, I can track back to experiences like that, where being confrontational and aggressive is totally counterproductive.
People, we're going to take a quick break here. We're coming to the last segment of our program this evening. We got Brother Yusuf here, and I'm going to ask him now. After that, when we come after the break, we've been together for quite some time. why he got involved in everything that he has been involved in, experiencing all that and his experiences so far. Stay tuned, and we'll be back after this break, inshallah. Coming back where we are. There we are. Sometimes I have to keep my glasses on because I can't see, going blind in old age.
Salam. Salam means peace. And Salam BCR, your local radio, promotes peace. Be a part of the Salam BCR team. Salam BCR. Your community, your radio. Get involved.
और सुन रहे हो? जी हाँ, इसी तरह हजारों और भी सुनने वाले हैं। आपके कारोबार की कामयाबी का राज सलाम BCR। सुनते रहिए सलाम BCR।
Things are slowly getting back to normal after living a very different life alongside COVID-19. As we go about our daily life spending more time with friends and family, shopping and visiting the mosque, there are things we can do to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe while COVID-19 is still in our communities. Here's a few things we can all do to look after each other. Wear a face mask if it makes you feel more comfortable when mixing indoors or in a crowded place. Fresh air is a great protector against COVID-19. Keep your home or workplace well ventilated. Open windows to let COVID-19 particles out and fresh air in. As the weather gets warmer, why not meet people outside? It's the simple things that make a difference, like continuing to wash our hands regularly, using a tissue to cover and catch coughs and sneezes, and staying at home if we feel unwell. You can still get your vaccine and the boosters. Visit the NHS website or call 119 to find out all your options. Why not ask them about the pharmacies across Bury offering a vaccine service?
This is Project Radio. Online, on air, everywhere.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मैं हूं जान रेम्बो और आप मेरी आवाज़ इस वक्त जिस रेडियो स्टेशन पर सुन रहे हैं उसका नाम है इस्लाम PCR। इस्लाम PCR की तमाम टीम को और तमाम सुनने वालों को मेरा प्यार भरा सलाम। तो सुनते रहिए इस्लाम PCR।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम प्यारे दोस्तों, मैं सखावत नाज ते सुनते रहो सलाम BCR।
मैं हनी अलबेला। सुनते रहिए सलाम BCR।
Want to be on radio? Then log into our website www.project29.org.uk and email me Aidan for more details.
हमारा मिशन अल्लाह की रज़ा, मोहम्मद से वफ़ा, पाकिस्तान का दिफा, हम हैं सलाम BCR।
Assalamu alaikum people, welcome back after the break. Inshallah, you're listening to Salam BCR with me, Haq4Haq, and my guest this afternoon is Ian Douglas Fan, or Muhammad Yusuf Fan, as we dearly like to call him and love him. A lot of things have happened. Ian has been party to and involved in his life, as we've discovered, from starting off as a teacher. I'm not sure whether he actually thought that at some stage be terrorism would be part of that, and people from Guantanamo Bay, and then the prevent agenda. You've actually been party to helping to develop?
Yeah. Right, I used to go down to London regularly, met with government ministers, and I chaired conferences and all sorts.
Has it served a purpose, Ian?
I mean, the thing is, yes, it has. Something had to be done. Was it done as best as it could have been done? No. But that's because we have hindsight now, and mistakes have been made. But also, you've got people whose agenda they will seek to exploit whatever you do and point the negative side of it. And it just takes a lot of committed individuals to ensure the appropriateness of the response. I mean, I remember when the Manchester bomb went off, one of the conversations I had with one of the Libyan boys from my school was around, what would have happened in Libya to this person who'd been arrested. And freed. And it said, just shoot him in the head. Just shoot him in the head.
Yeah.
And I said, well, remember that, because it hasn't happened here.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not perfect what's happened here, far from it.
Yeah.
But you know what would have happened in Libya. Oh, they only have to think
that you're guilty,
that you know somebody.
Yeah.
And they'll kill you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Halas. And that's from a Libyan child.
Yeah.
From Tripoli.
Yeah.
Do you know? And so we have to. There's a real danger that we become smug and self-satisfied, aren't we? So we're so wonderful here, you know, etc., etc., etc. This country is a beacon of this, that, and the other, and it only is when you compare it to other places. All right, you know, if you actually compare it to the utopia that you want to see in this, we're nowhere near it. We're nowhere near it. But one of the reasons why there are so many refugees in this country is they recognise it as one of the safest places in the world. My mum was a refugee, right?
Yeah.
You know, she came over on a boat across the channel, albeit on a proper boat. And the boat that was next to her was sunk with 6,000 plus people drowning. Right, and her boat was missed. Right, so you know, son of a refugee. Refugees come to places where they're going to be safe.
Everybody, I think, you know, well, it's that instinct for survival, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, one wants to, who wants to die? And you know, this weekend, people commemorated, people, you know, paid their respects to a tragedy that happened here, what was it, 6 years ago?
5 years ago.
5 years ago. The Manchester bombing. My nephew was at the show actually, and he suffers from the trauma of it. I mean, a grown man, married man now. But he suffers from the after effects of that. So you know, it's affected a lot of people, and to know that the young man responsible was affiliated to your school.
Yeah, he came in year 9, and he stayed until year 11, and it's a matter of record because I've given evidence to the inquiry. And I actually remembered him, which is unusual because there's so many children. But I remembered him because we just moved into new school buildings in 2011.
Right.
And the first person I caught on camera stealing a mobile phone was him.
Oh.
You know, and I dragged him into my office, you know, and he sort of denied everything. So I showed him the footage and he just smiled. He thought it was vaguely amusing. It had no impact on him whatsoever.
Right.
I mean, you know, this was the school that was the lead school, probably nationally, on Prevent.
Right.
Right. They trialled everything through my school.
Right.
And yet, the number of young people who ended up as terrorists or ended up, you know, was not insignificant.
What makes a terrorist, Yusuf?
You see, if there was a simple answer to that, we would not have any. There isn't a simple answer to that at all.
Because if they say they're Muslims, and we know, you and I both know, that to commit suicide, kill yourself, and kill another person, an innocent person that has done you no harm, is the worst, it's the most heinous thing one can do. And it's not only in this life that we suffer for it if you're alive, but in the afterlife as we believe.
Yes.
So where do we go with that then?
Well, I mean, because that's obviously not what they believe. It's not what they're told. It's not what they're indoctrinated into believing. And people like you and me, they see as being outside of the faith. So it's, you know, the ability of human beings to act irrationally and dangerously and viciously is immeasurable. And you see it in every generation. You know, when I look at you know, people would say, well, Prevent was a waste of time because you produced Salman Abedi, to which Prevent didn't produce Salman Abedi. It just, you know, it failed to. What produced him was the war in Libya and his family and his parents, and his father.
Right.
You know, he can come and sue me if he wants. You know, but he won't set foot in this country because he'll be arrested the second he does.
Right.
That's what produced Salman Abedi. But I mean, we had one example where some kids came to us and said, "There's some kids going to go to Syria.
Right.
Can you stop them?"
Muslim kids or just white Muslim kids?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the whole school was Muslim, pretty much.
Oh, right. Okay.
You know,
okay. Yeah.
And
right.
so, yeah, we stopped them.
Right.
They didn't go.
Right.
They would have gone.
How did you manage to do that?
By calling in the police.
Oh, right, okay.
Simple as that. You don't, and to me, it's safeguarding.
Yeah.
No, these are children.
Do you think those kids that went from London, those three girls, the Shamima Begum and her two friends, you think, because was Prevent around then or not?
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah, yeah.
So those young girls, I still I shudder.
I'm close to the family of the ones from Manchester who went.
Right.
And the thing is that when I was talking about how you were talking about influencing.
Yeah.
Go onto YouTube, right? Go onto social media,
right?
And you will find another agenda and various agendas. It'll prove the Earth's flat. It'll prove whatever you want it to prove. That ghosts exist, that you can time travel. You'll find it, and certainly. The radicalization, one of the things that Daesh did very successfully was use social media to radicalize people.
Right.
They would groom people. I've seen, when I with the police, I've seen some footage of, the wonderful health service we have in Mosul.
Right.
And, the doctors, and you come here and it's this, it's that, it's great,
Really?
It was, so these are children. This is the thing which I really want to emphasize, is that when somebody is 14, 15, 16, like Shamima Begum, and they make those decisions, they regret them for the rest of their life.
Absolutely.
Or don't, but they do.
Yeah.
And that
More
should be,
often than not,
of course they do, because, it's when you actually, when you actually go and you see these things, many people just turn around trying to come straight back. Other people don't. And the other thing we have to bear in mind is that, that forgiveness is not just a divine attribute. Forgiveness should be a human attribute as well, and we should forgive. That doesn't mean that we don't hold people responsible for what we've done. We must. People who have beheaded other people. I mean, I've met the brother of the aid worker from Salford who was beheaded. We had him come into school to talk about his brother,
right,
and how much love he had for Muslims. This is the brother
the taxi driver who went.
No, yes, his brother.
Yeah,
we had Martin Hett's mum come into school.
Right.
We've had any number of people come in to talk to our lads about these things.
And yet we know that Islam says, if you want to be forgiven, you learn to forgive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that I think that so much of the messaging that comes out of the mosques is irrelevant to young people.
Are they failing their young people?
They're failing everyone. I mean, it's except for the people who regard it as a sort of almost like a club. What I think one of the things which our community has failed to do in the mosques is actually talk about the issues that young people face, and not just young people, in ways that they're going to listen to, rather than just switch off. That when detached youth work was actually going to where the young people are, and not dressed in a suit in my case, as a teacher, but just dressed normally, and talking normally, and trying to get them to engage. I get absolutely, you go into Bolton, right, and drugs are rife.
Yeah.
Not even Bury, Bolton. Drugs are rife, beggars everywhere.
Yeah.
And yet you've got people wanting to build more and more mosques, right?
Yeah.
Which, to me, they're vanity projects. There are plenty of buildings.
Yeah.
They don't have to look like a mosque.
No.
A mosque, the first mosque didn't look like a mosque. It was a hut.
Yeah.
Our Prophet Muhammad, he lived in a hut.
Yeah.
Right? That was, there's your template for a mosque. Right?
Yeah.
There's your template.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
But what you should be doing is making sure that those young people, right, do not run prostitutes, do not sell drugs, do not drive their car through red lights, ending up killing people. Yeah. Right? These are the good deeds. These are the deeds that we should be focusing on. And that's why I was lucky that I was put where I was put to do what I did, and whatever success I had, is just there, and whatever failures I had, you are just a tool. You must put yourself into situations where you can make a difference. The strapline I ended up coming up with the kids was be the best you can be. That's not be better than somebody else. Be the best that you can be.
I think that's a fantastic line to close this chapter on. And I wanted to ask so that our listeners know how and why you became involved with Project 29. Ian is one of our trustees from the very first when we set it up. So what was that about?
I've done next to nothing, and you know that full well. I was just a name which you could be used quite willingly to associate myself with what is worth. I have done things with you, but at the end of the day, the number of people that you've engaged with in the community that have, over the years, they're the ones that put in all the legwork and all the training and everything else that's gone on. Most trustees are like me, quite useless. They're just there to.
It's look. At the end of the day, you could be held accountable. You put your name
to
God,
something. I know that.
You know what I mean?
There are legal obligations, which
as a trustee, you're also the secretary of the organization. So there falls a responsibility.
I know.
But you didn't know me from Adam prior to that. In fact, you were recommended by a mutual
acquaintance
person. Of interest, and I appreciate that you took up that offer, and you're still with us. And again, I think we'd like to move it forward. In I don't know, maybe I don't know how we can move it forward, into the community, because I think at the end of the day that was one of our objectives. Media, being my kind of forte, and you being an educator, we thought that's something that we could move forward. Maybe I don't know. What do you think we could progress to?
I think that there is too much passivity amongst people, because if you look at social media, it doesn't require you to do anything except sit down and play with the phone or play with a computer. So the amount of engagement that you do is all homebound, or on the bus or wherever you happen to be, and yet the power that exists within social media to do good or to make a difference is enormous. But essentially, most people spend their lives looking at TikTok and laughing at things that are just not in the slightest bit amusing more than once you've seen them. So if you think about it, you have an organisation here, and you have people here, and access to people who can get anyone who's interested actually involved in one of the biggest industries in this country. I mean, media and the whole aspect of things earns a fortune for this country, but more importantly, has the ability to impact on what people think, what they believe, and how they act. And people who are sitting at home now, not listening to this probably, or who at some point might hear of this, should realise that that they've actually got an organisation which, if they knocked up and said, "Well, what can I do?" I can't do anything. Will be enabled, will be empowered to think about how they can contribute, because it will benefit them.
First and foremost.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of self-confidence, virtually every young person I meet lacks self-confidence. They're confident enough to swear at you, or confident enough to punch you on the nose, but you take them. One of the things that always used to make me laugh, right, is that our kids have all got mobile phones. They're stuck to their hands. They can't breathe without the mobile phone. You take that off them, and they're lost. They need life support. You ask them to pick up a phone and to phone a prospective employer for work placement or anything like that, and you have to literally drag them to the phone and make them do it because, I can't do that. What do you mean you can't? You live on the damn phone, and yet you won't do this. You won't bring yourself to do that. And it's just a lack of confidence. And one of the things which they would gain by interacting and engaging with organisations like this There's a huge amount of savvy income. I have a daughter who worked as a volunteer on a radio station. I can't stop her talking now. I can't stop her talk. Nobody can, right? She's garrulous, right? Yeah, and before that, you know, meek little lamb, wouldn't say boo to a goose. Now she quite happily cook one. So and that is through engaging in radio, in local radio.
And I think that's one of the reasons why community radios were supposed to be part of community society to help those that don't normally would have an opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I do find though, Ian, is that again, because you know our content primarily is for Asians.
Yeah.
For one, because that's what the license kind of like, you know, stipulated to serve a community that's not already being served by mainstream. So it's not that we don't encourage everybody, our members from all societies and all communities, that our content that goes out is for those. But on the production side, it can be anybody, no matter religion, color, gender, whatever. We're not you know segregating there. But I one thing I must admit that I have found is that you know, educational authorities, establishments do observe you or do see you with a certain amount of suspicion of that, you know, that what your objective is. And you know, when you don't have an objective, you don't have an agenda. Not a prevent agenda, no any agenda. You know, the agenda is to just empower, the thing that you said, empowering people through their own learning and development. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's particularly as we're not affiliated with any big organisation. So if you take something like the Muslim Heritage Centre, you know, they've got Asal Khan behind them, you know, the MP for Gorton and that area. They've got all this clout politically. They've got a lot of money because a lot of wealthy Asians living in Manchester have funded it and everything else. And so there's a kind of like has a snowball effect, is that they therefore are able to be taken as not being a threat or an unknown quantity, because they're very much a known quantity. Whereas when you have a small organisation like we are, which has a big reach, but we're very much sort of located in Bury, it's not the same, and you're pushing at closed doors as opposed to open doors, which is remarkable. You know, to have a facility here, which is anyone can use. I mean, you know, if the health service wanted to come along here and do to make something,
raise
awareness on coronavirus, on anything at all, they've only got to ask. All right, and you know, it's not like, you know, we're not quoted on the stock exchange. All right, this does not. All we ever do is make a loss.
Absolutely.
Right, and not a little one, a quite considerable loss, and that is our aim, is to be absolutely loss making. So you know, I find it bizarre that, and the thing is, you see that there is an industry. I noticed it with Prevent. There were people who came onto the Prevent agenda. From the community, and I'm not talking about in Bury, driving Audi A7s or Q7s, sorry, and with very snappy briefcases and the latest Apple gear, and what they were producing was average. You know, it was okay, but they were getting money was being thrown at it because it had to be, because nobody knew what to do, and some people were very quick off the mark to make money and to milk that particular cow. When you have an organisation which doesn't do that, that isn't set up like that, and has no remit for that, people don't understand it. They don't really get it.
Tell people that they should get involved. You've got 2 minutes.
Well, they need to get involved, and not just people from just not people from our communities or the communities, but also local organisations. If you've got a food bank and you want to get your message out there, local radio like this, which does go into the community where other people can't get, this would be, you know, the ideal opportunity for your stall. To set yourself out, to get your message across to people who regard themselves as being excluded a lot of the time from the decisions that people make. A lot of people in power, are there because there's money to be made, and they have agendas which are not necessarily altruistic, i.e. just for the community. The only reason I'm involved with Anwar and with this organisation is because it is completely altruistic. It has no, there has no, I mean, I can't understand why he does it, to be honest, because he gets nothing from it except heartache. And yet, when you're driven to try to make a difference, then you can get through, you go through pretty much any trials and tribulations simply because you believe in what you're doing and you want to make a difference to the community that you serve.
Wonderful. Yusuf, my dear brother, it's been wonderful having you here, and I thank you very much for coming in, and I hope it sort of enlightened people regarding Yusuf Fenn, what he does, what he's been about, and hopefully we use his experience for the future as a consult. And I want to thank you people for tuning in as you did. You messaged in. Dr. Noreen, thank you so much. Dr. Javed Bhai, thank you so much. Baji Tawassum, thank you. Rashid Bhatti Sahab, thank you so much. Apne Mia Liaquat Sahab, you phoned in, thank you so much. You see, this is one of my ambitions, is to get people talking. And sometimes I'll pick up sort of subjects, Yusuf, that people are reluctant to talk about. But they find it infuriating that I'm all in favor of it.
Oh yeah.
And it gets them really riled up, and so they do phone in.
Yeah.
So we achieved the objective.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. So my dear brothers and sisters, मेरे प्यारे बहनों भाइयों, बड़ी मेहरबानी आपकी, अल्लाह आपको जज़ाए खैर दे, आपने हमारा साथ दिया, और मैं अब आपसे लूँगा इजाज़त। बस इसी दुआ के साथ हमारे फरीद भाई आ गए हैं, वो अपना प्रोग्राम 7 बजे से लेकर 9 बजे तक आपके साथ होंगे इंशाअल्लाह। मैं उनका भी बड़ा शुक्र है, जैसे मैं आप सब लोगों का जो भी हमारे साथ ताउन करते हैं, जिस किसी तरह भी हमारे साथ आके प्रोग्राम करते हैं या हमारे लिए दुआएं करते हैं, मैं उनका भी बड़ा मशकूर हूँ। हमारे किसी प्रोग्राम पे तनकीद करते हैं, यकीन कीजिए वो मुझे सबसे अच्छी बात लगती है। इससे पता होता है कि वो लोग सुन रहे हैं और हमारी बात उनको उनके मिजाज के हिसाब से नहीं, लेकिन हमारा मकसद नहीं होता किसी को परेशान करना, किसी की दिलाजारी करना, नहीं। हम चाहते हैं कि सिर्फ हम अपनी आवाज़ लोगों तक पहुँचाएँ। अगर गुस्सा गिला है तो उसको रफ़ा दफ़ा करें, अगर हमारी कोई सोच एक जैसी है कि उसको लेकर साथ चलें। तो इंशाअल्लाह मैं उम्मीद रखता हूँ कि मेरा और आपका साथ कल शाम आपके साथ होगा 6:30 बजे। उससे पहले होंगे हमारे सैफुर रहमान साहब। देखिए, आपको पता है ना कि हमारी शाजिया बहन हमारे साथ इस वक्त नहीं है, तो हम उन्हें कितना मिस कर रहे हैं कि वो प्रोग्राम ही उनके जो मिसिंग है। बहरहाल एनीवे, इंशाअल्लाह अगर और कोई हमारी बहनें या बेटियां या बुज़ुर्ग सुन रहे हैं जो हमारे साथ इन्वॉल्व होना चाहें या प्रोग्राम करना चाहें, तो आपसे यही कहूँगा कि आप हमारे साथ रब्ता करें। नंबर है 079126222961। ये हमारा एडमिन का नंबर है, उस पर आप हमसे बात कर सकते हैं या मैसेज कर सकते हैं। तो इंशाअल्लाह कोई आपके लिए मुश्किल नहीं होगी, दुश्वारी नहीं होगी। ये है और है कि आपको कुछ थोड़ा सा टाइम देना होगा, 2 घंटे 3 घंटे जो भी आपके पास हो, तो यकीनन इसको आप सदका जारिया समझ कर भी आप कर सकते हैं। तो इंशाअल्लाह उम्मीद है कि आप हमारे साथ मिलेंगे। तो बस मैं लूँगा इजाज़त आपके साथ, बस इसी दुआ के साथ कि अल्लाह आपको अपने हिफ्ज़-ओ-अमान में रखे। आप अपनों के साथ, अपने प्यारों के साथ खुशियाँ बांटिए। उनको जो भी गुस्से गिले हैं, मेरे प्यारे बहनों में बार बार कहता हूँ, गुस्से गिले इंसान के साथ नहीं रहने चाहिए। हम जो हमारे बस में, हम इंशाअल्लाह उसको करने की कोशिश करेंगे, और उम्मीद है कि आप भी ऐसा ही। मुल्क पाकिस्तान, हुक्मरान पाकिस्तान को नहीं, अफवाज पाकिस्तान को अपनी दुआ में याद रखिए। अल्लाह हमारे मुल्क में आसानियाँ पैदा फरमाए। अल्लाह आपको हमें सबको आसानियाँ तकसीम करने की तौफीक अता फरमाए। तो बस इसी के साथ दूंगा इजाज़त। अल्लाह आपका हमें नासर हो। पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद, अफवाज पाकिस्तान पाइंदाबाद, लॉन्ग लिव ब्रिटानिया। क्योंकि you see, we live in a country, and I always say, Yusuf, I'm so grateful, so I feel so blessed that obviously it's given me opportunities, and it has given a lot of people opportunities. And as a Muslim, I would be a traitor if I didn't feel that for the wish well for this country that where we live in. Yes, it has failings. Every country has failings. Every government has failings. But that's people, But for what it has provided everybody, I think we should be grateful. Until tomorrow, please take care and wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Spot Blue International Property Agents. Looking for property in Dubai or Turkey?